Good evening. It's 6 o'clock and welcome to this meeting of the Corporate Performance and Budget Scrutiny Committee. I'm Councillor Pete Pillinger, I chair the committee. We have committee members in the Civic Centre along with officer support, and the meeting is being live streamed via YouTube and will be available on the Council's website. Some housekeeping for those in the Civic Centre: there are no fire drills expected. And if the alarm goes off, please leave by the emergency exits on either side of the room and congregate in the car park. Please turn mobile phones off and switch your microphones off when not speaking. For those joining us by Microsoft Teams, please remain muted and indicate at the appropriate time when you would like to speak, and you will be brought in. If members would now introduce themselves, I'll start with the gentleman on my left.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. Michael Green, Councillor for Moss Side Ward and Vice Chairman of this committee.
I'm Will King. I'm the Councillor for Longton and Hutton West.
Councillor David Bollenberg for Bamber Bridge West.
Councillor David Shaw, representing Howick and Priory in Penwortham.
Ben Story, Democratic Member Services Officer.
Darren Cranshaw, Head of Democratic Services.
And Councillor Jane Bell is joining us on Teams. Along also noting that with us are Councillor Karen Walton, Councillor Kath Unsworth and Councillor Phil Smith, also on Teams, who are not members of the committee, though at least one of them is a substitute. Councillor Deborah Ashton has given apologies for absence. Members are reminded to declare any interest they might have on agenda items as we come to them. We have minutes of meeting on Monday the 9th of March 2026. Are they correct? Could anybody? I will propose them as correct. Would anybody second them? Thank you, Councillor Green. And also minutes of Thursday the 9th of April, which again I think are correct. Would anybody second those? Councillor King, thank you.
I'm happy with those, Chair.
Yeah. I should have asked if anybody wants to make any alterations to those. I take it, if you think they're correct, that we don't. Thank you. We have our recommendations on the update. I have a query on page 30 around the implications of right to buy on properties owned by the council, and a response will be made outside the meeting. We have, as our item 6, our Q4 performance monitoring report. We are glad to welcome the Leader of the Council, Councillor Matthew Tomlinson, and he is supported by Caroline Wolfenden, Director of Charge and Delivery. Would you like to make some opening comments, Councillor Tomlinson?
Thank you. I will just briefly, Chairman, if you'll forgive me. I'm sure members have got questions they want to ask. I think it's a really encouraging and in fact, quite impressive report. If you look through, there's an awful lot of green indicators, which means we're doing the things that we promised we would do. And just a couple of highlights from me. Our very first cultural strategy, which is going to be really useful when we're talking to community groups and people like that. Our recycling rates are up, and presumably with the introduction, this is before the introduction of the food collection, so we should see a good improvement again there. our leisure centre visits. I'm sure Councillor Hunter will want to tell you about how successful our leisure centres are later, but the number of visits up are quite significant. Our planning department processed 100% of major applications on time, and the number of days it takes for us to deal with a disabled facilities grant is dropping significantly, which is really, really encouraging. And there's a whole range of other green indicators I could talk to, but I know that human nature being what it is, the committee will automatically be drawn to those indicators that are not green. And so just very, very quickly, without wishing to preempt what your questions might be, the three red ones that I did want to talk about, the park improvements, where we said we would deliver 5 and we've only done 4. That is just because the ward councillors wanted to do something slightly different to what was proposed, and we did consult with local residents. So I guess as part of being a listening council, sometimes you say you're going to do something within a certain time frame, and then the residents come back and say, well, actually, would you consider doing something different? And that's on quite a small green space in Farrington East. So when Councillor Alty tells you she wants something different doing, you tend to listen and see if you can do something different. So that's why that target is slightly off. The other target is an interesting one, the median workplace earnings in the borough, which we're not at target. I think it's really important to point out this isn't medium earnings of people who live in the borough, it's medium earnings of people who work in the borough. And as I'm sure we all know, many people who live in South Ribble travel outside South Ribble to work, whether that's to Manchester, Liverpool or Preston. And in fact, I think it does identify in the report that the median earnings of people who live in the borough is quite a bit higher than the earnings of people who work in the borough. And there's some explanation there, but if committee members want to know more, we're happy to try and help them. And then the other one really, and which is causing a little bit of concern, I think, is the sickness levels. And I think I spoke about that last time we came and said that, I believed that part of that was because we had waste collection service and the leisure service in-house. So we report on people who work in the waste collection service who are sick, whereas, for instance, at our neighbours in Chorley, who still outsource waste collection, if someone is off sick there in the waste collection service, it's not reported as part of a council sickness. Obviously, people who work in waste are outside in all hours, doing a really great job, but let's be honest, it's a physical job. And so I did ask for those figures to be separated, and I believe they've been shared with the committee as a supplementary item, and it kind of backs up a little bit some of that, but clearly there are some other issues that we're trying to address. I think that's all I want to say. I'm really pleased with the report. I think it's really impressive, but I'm happy to try and answer any questions, and if they're difficult ones, I'll ask Caroline to answer them.
Thank you for your introduction. I have to say, as chair, when I was reading through this, I thought it was an excellent Q4 report, and noted, as you have, the amount of green on the dashboard that has been developed partly as a result of this committee's questioning over the last 2 or 3 years. It makes the data very easily accessible, and grateful for the work that was put in on that and the continuing work that brings clarity to things. It's, I'd say, not generally positive. It's particularly positive, I think, compared to some reports we've seen in the past. So we do want to give credit where credit's due to our staff in the council for the work that they do to enable us to achieve objectives that are set by the senior management and the political leadership of the council. Here's a question that relates, we've got a big, well, it's not quite an elephant in the room, but how will performance be maintained as we go through the next 2 years as local government reorganisation proposals are implemented so that we don't take our eye off the ball?
Thanks for that. I think certainly from myself as a leader and from Cabinet, our message to the Chief Executive is it's very much business as usual as far as we are concerned. We're clearly acutely aware there will be some work going on to get us ready for local government reorganisation, but we cannot take our eye off the ball. And if us as members are going to give any legacy to the new council, whatever shape or form it looks like, from my point of view, it's got to be that we're handing over an efficient, effective and well-run council, and that will be absolutely my focus going forward. I'm not taking my foot off the gas. You know, last full council meeting we said we agreed to buy Ockleshaw House. That's not a sign of a council that's taking its eye off the ball. We've got park improvements coming up at Holland House in Waltonley Dale. That's not a sign of a council taking its foot off the gas or its eye off the ball, whatever metaphor you choose. We're absolutely committed to running a proper council, no matter what's going on over there. We can't ignore it, but we have to keep our eye on delivering for our residents, and that's the message that's coming very strongly from me in the Cabinet to the Chief Executive.
Yeah. On the subject of local government reorganisation, we note the summary on page 57 and an appendix as part of item agenda 7 on page 99. Could you give us a rough outline of what is actually happening with local government reorganisation? Who's talking to who? At what level are conversations going on and for what purpose?
It's really difficult until we actually know what we're going to, but obviously there's a lot of work going on. Certainly our colleagues at the County Council are doing a lot of work, and they're talking to us about agreeing formula for how do we decide to disaggregate services. So obviously the county will have a big picture view about things like children's services, adult social care, highways maintenance. These are big services that spend a lot of money, and there's a lot. I know there's an awful lot of work going on at the moment to try and disaggregate that down to district levels, so that when we do know, then we're ahead of the game, as it were, so that we can put something together, so that in vesting day in 28.
Yes.
Is it 28?
April 2028.
In April 2028. My life's passing me by, Chairman, it really is. That, you know, we'll be in a good place. I've been, as I know you have as well, to conferences talking about the journey to local government, the reorganisation. And obviously the priority has got to be on vesting day that services that protect and look after people carry on. They've got to carry on. We've got to make sure that people are safe, that services are legal, and I think that will be the focus once we know where we're going. But there is work going on in the background about, as I say, this disaggregation and finding out what it actually means to break the county council up.
So are you meeting with other council leaders yourself?
We have a regular meeting. I do smile when you bring that up, because the thing we agree on the most is that we disagree. But we agree to disagree quite amicably. Once the government tell us what the footprint's going to be, I think there'll be much more agreement then, because we'll have to get on and get stuff done. At the moment, it's still a lot. Well, if I'm with you and I'm with them, and what we're going to do if they split things up, and you know, and of course we wouldn't be elected members if we weren't concerned about things like wards and numbers of councillors. And again, all that's going to become so much clearer in about 6 weeks' time, I hope.
I was going to ask you about whether our Chief Exec is meeting with the Chief Exec of Chorley and West Lancashire, but that's an interesting question. He'll be talking to himself. But he will have quite a lot of responsibility, particularly being a shared chief executive of 3 councils. What support are we able to give him in that role as he extends his wings over 3 councils?
I think I talked at full council about, as far as I'm concerned and my cabinet's concerned, he is not going to be the chief executive of 3 councils until we're confident he's got the right support behind him. Because, as I said before, we remain ambitious, the stuff we want to do. The process to get a deputy chief exec on board is now well advanced, and hopefully we'll have some good news to share with members in the very near future.
Just to press you a little further on LGR, when the government tells us what the councils are, the new unitaries are going to be, do we have any sort of plan A, plan B, plan C, depending what's coming up of how that might work? Are we going to be having our feet running on day one, or are we going to spend a month trying to sort out how we organise for the change?
I think it depends what the change is. And speaking to people, it seems relatively clear to me that unless the government do something that none of us are expecting, there's only 2 realistic options on the table for local government reorganisation in Lancashire. And that's, a 3 or a 4. And I think we're well placed wherever that is. We've made it quite clear what our preferred option is, which is the 4. But if it's a 3, we can work with that, and we will have to work with that. We can't sulk if we don't get the answer we want. But I think we've got a good track record. I was speaking to some people today who from outside our area, talking about the good reputation that Chorley and South Ribble have for working collaboratively, not just with each other but with other people, and the reputation we have of being 2 well-run councils who know what they want to do and get on and do it. And I think we'll take that same approach with local government reorganisation as well.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. Good evening to both of you. Can I take you to page 36, please, paragraph 9? And the number of indicators that can be reported are 71% for corporate strategy and 57% for organisational. These to me seem relatively low. What steps are we taking to make sure that these indicators are improved moving forward?
I think in terms of obviously the corporate strategy indicators, obviously they are monitored like on a quarterly basis through this process, but similarly obviously with the organisational like indicators, they are monitored like at a service level, and they are discussed regularly at management meetings. I would say that there's a real focus like within the organisation, like on performance and improving those things. Obviously the way in which we report as well, we're very focused where we're not particularly performing like well, where we've got obviously like amber or red indicators. We're very clear about making sure services identify actions like that can be taken, and it's not just a case of saying, oh, we're not performing particularly well in that area. It's about saying, well, what action are we going to take, and we make it very clear in these reports what action we are taking, and we will continue obviously to monitor that and work with services to put in place those action plans.
My apologies.
Yeah, thank you for that response. Could I just ask by when are we likely to see these figures actually increasing? Particularly the 57%, which is extremely low. When can we see that, say, being at least 2/3?
I know where you've got the figures from because it's in the report, but I'm trying to work out where that figure comes from. So you might have to give us a minute or 2 to find out why. Because when I look at the report, and I've said, there's only 3 that are red, and then suddenly only 57% are green, and I'd need to dig. I'm not at all discounting the question. I'm just saying it's not an easy one to answer straight off. And so you'll have to, can we come back to it?
Yeah, happy for you to come back to it or to give us a written report at a later time. The point of scrutiny is to raise questions for you, which maybe are not answerable immediately. So do understand that. Councillor Bollenberg.
Hi. On page 38, paragraph 21, performance highlights, there is one marked as blue, which means the milestones have been met. That's the weekly food waste collection. We're wondering what monitoring is taking place, what ongoing monitoring is taking place to ensure the scheme is effective and residents are satisfied with the service.
Thanks. And I think I want to congratulate the staff who rolled it out as a programme. It wasn't particularly universally popular with our residents, but as a rollout in terms of being prepared, making sure we got the bins, making sure we got the staff, making sure we got the vehicles, it was a well-run project, and I think we ought to congratulate the team for doing that. Clearly, this food waste is being weighed on a week-to-week basis, so we know how much we're collecting. I think, was it 11 elephants? I think. I always measure things by the size of whales, but apparently we measure food waste in elephants. We collected 11 elephants in the first week, and I'm sure we'll be measuring that regularly to see how much it grows. I think it's one of those projects where at the beginning there'll be people who are a bit reticent, but over time people will just get used to it. It's new to us collecting food waste. It's not new in a lot of parts of the country. There's lots of councils have been doing it for a long time. And actually, the great benefit of it is your food waste is being taken away every week instead of 2 weeks when we used to put it in the residual waste bin. So it's an improvement in service. It will improve our recycling. But we will definitely be monitoring it on a regular basis, and I'm sure that Councillor Unsworth will be pleased to come back and report on progress.
Can I just sorry, just to add, obviously the leaders talked about sort of like the collection like rates in terms of like tonnage, but one of the things the team are looking at is like options around like monitoring that participation as well. So I mean at the moment we haven't got an accurate figure in terms of that like participation, but observations are sort of suggesting around about the 40% like mark, but obviously that varies like from ward to ward. Some areas we're seeing it more like 50%, some it's more like 30%, but as I said, that's not like wholly accurate, that's just an estimation. But the team are looking at potential software processes like that we can look at to actually get a bit of a more accurate monitoring process around participation rates, and that'll obviously help us to target like some of those specific areas where we're seeing like lower uptake. So that is one of the things that the team is looking at to take forward.
Thank you. I was going to ask about the second half of the question, which was to do with residents and satisfaction, but I think you've answered that with the fact we'll be able to go back to those wards where it's not really been picked up, and I presume there'll be a campaign to try and up that. Great, thank you.
Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. Can I take you to page 39, please, at the bottom, paragraph 28? And that sets out the corporate strategy performance indicators that are performing on and above target. First of all, I think it will be remiss of us not to congratulate our staff for their work in actually achieving these targets, which is pleasing to see. But moving forwards, how are these targets going to be reviewed and increased for future years so that we can ensure that we can achieve more for the residents of South Ribble?
Thank you. The corporate strategy, it's not exactly a living document, but it is something that we review on a regular basis, and it's it's a document that is influenced both by members and by staff and our residents. So we want to be clear that the things we're trying to achieve are things that either the government says we have to achieve, or that we as members want to do, or indeed that what our residents have said. So I'd expect us to be doing a refresh quite soon of the corporate strategy, and that again, that strategy will influence what our targets are. But that, as I say, it's not exactly a living document, but it isn't. The corporate strategy is not something we put on a shelf and allow to gather dust. It does flex at regular intervals.
Something. Sorry, just to add, obviously this forms part of our business planning process, so we do review the indicators like on an annual basis. We have actually just done our cycle of business planning, and we have looked obviously at the indicators like and targets. As the leader said, we are going to be looking at refreshing the corporate strategy as well, and obviously like the review of the indicators, you know, forms part of that process as well. So hopefully that provides a level of assurance that this is an iterative process in terms of, you know, looking at those indicators and reviewing those, like I said, where we are meeting targets and making sure that they are, you know, the stretch targets and the much more ambitious in terms of where we're meeting them.
Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Page 42, if I may. Penwortham Master Plan. Oh, you're smiling, and of course, I was going to bring it up. So what has been the delay in engaging with the County Council, and what engagement is proposed to move things along, please?
I think I can answer that quite quickly. The delay is the County Council. And I know that's quite abrupt, but it's really frustrating. And even the County Councillor for the area, who would like to advance the Penwortham Master Plan just as much as I would, is just as frustrated as I am. They're proving to be quite a challenging organisation to get any information, up-to-date information out of. And I don't mind saying that in a public forum. And for all the challenges and the risks of local government reorganisation, one of the undoubted benefits will be that delivering a project like this will be delivered by one council and not two, who may have differing priorities. But, you know, getting a Section 278 agreement out of the legal department, allowing us to work on the public realm, it seems to be like some Byzantine performance that disappears into County Hall and never comes out again. And as I said, the County Councillor for the area, who we all know because he comes in here, is just as frustrated as we are. But we keep on at him. The two smaller projects are ready to go. I'm not sure if work's started yet, but they're ready to go. And then the larger project, we continue to talk to the County Council and hope. Sorry, I can't be more ambitious than
with
that.
Your experience of the County Council, I take that absolutely at face value. Has the County Council provided any funding for the master plan?
They didn't, not for the master plan in itself, but when they found out what we were doing on Liverpool Road, and then it became apparent that they were planning to do something on Liverpool Road maybe in a couple of years' time, although they hadn't told us that they were going to do that. I'm pretty sure that there's some funding that we may be able to get from them for what they wanted to do to help us deliver what we wanted to do. And so we'll end up with some hybrid project. So I think they promised us some funding towards that. No, I think they have. Pretty sure they have. We can confirm.
I'm very grateful to you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I noted that they have a Active Travel England funded programme. Presumably if it's being funded, they've got to spend the money on the appropriate things, which means if it's coming into the Penwortham Master Plan, they will fund it from that funds that have come to them. I'm assuming that's the way things work, but who knows? thank you for your response. Councillor Bollenberg.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to draw your attention to page 43, which is the number of improvements to parks and open spaces table. In the reason box, there's the second paragraph. Delivery of the remaining scheme at Lever House, Got Green, Leyland has been delayed due to design changes requested during the consultation process, consultation phase. I guess our question is, if we're doing meaningful consultation, we shouldn't expect changes, and we're wondering why timescales aren't built into the project plans to allow for those changes, so we wouldn't necessarily be delayed. We would be within the post-consultation change phase. How can we learn from this?
First of all, apologies to Councillor Alty and Wharton Hardman, because it says Leyland, and I'm sure they'd be keen to tell you it's actually in Farrington, although it's in that sort of blurry boundary reason. I think I did indicate in my opening remarks, it was actually the ward councillors had done some separate consultation on top of what we did as a council. So they'd been doing some door knocking in the area and talking to people, and it became clear to them that if the residents could get what they wanted, which is what we would like to deliver for people, it would be a slightly different scheme than the one that we'd done one of our official consultations on. So we could have gone ahead and delivered the original plan, and we would have done it on time. But when the two ward councillors came back to us and said, well, actually, we've been doing some door knocking and there's a couple of things we want to change, our cabinet member for Parks, Councillor Farnworth, agreed to make that change, but that meant we couldn't deliver it as quickly and as easily as we thought. Now, you know, in a perfect world, would you build in a bit of time to allow for things to come forward from the residents? Maybe you would. But if you're being ambitious and you think we can deliver this, we've done our consultation and these are the responses we've got, so we can do it in this time. But then the local councillor comes back and says, well, actually, we've been knocking on doors and face-to-face people are telling us something slightly different. I would say that shows us as a listening council who's prepared to flex its plans to try and give very local residents, because this is literally the people who live around that patch, to try and give the local residents what they want. And if that means we get a red on an indicator for 1 quarter, I'll take it.
Just like to all right. Just like to come back with something. It's like a dog about to leap. Does that show then? Has what the actions of Councillor Alty and Councillor Wharton Harman highlighted an improvement within the existing consultation process, and should the council actually be liaising with the ward councillors earlier on and saying, look, we're going to do this, we're going to have a consultation process, but it would be really beneficial for us if you could go out and canvass your ward residents. We know the ward residents, and it's proven in this case, whether it proved in all cases, I couldn't say, but it's proven in this case to be a valuable exercise. Is that something that the council may want to take on board?
It's really difficult with consultations because I know lots of members will say, well, you should literally knock on every door and ask people, whereas the law would say you just have to put a sign on a lamppost. And I think as a council we try and do more than the law says, but we also try to be reasonable in terms of time and cost. So we advertise, we do. We might do a letter drop. We certainly would tell. The ward councillors and this knew about this project and had their own ideas about the project. Councillor Alty in particular has been keen to move this project on. But then once we did come up with a plan, as I said, quite rightly, it's in their gift to go around and knock on doors and say to people, this is the plan. And people who didn't engage with the original consultation, obviously, and enough of the people said something different. So I guess that's them doing their duty as a ward councillor. Could they have done it earlier? I'm not going to suggest that Councillor Alty and Councillor Wharton-Hardman should have done something sooner, but maybe in a perfect world, that's how it could have been, yeah.
Just to clarify, I'm not suggesting that they were in any way lacking in their response. I'm actually suggesting that maybe the council itself should engage with the councillors and ask them to do that. I'm rather suggesting it's not a failing of the council, ward councillors, as a failing of the council, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and as I said, you know, consultations can be on a long spectrum from this is what the law says you have to do to this is a perfect consultation. We always try to be well away from the minimum, but is it always perfect? No, it's not, and we get that. And we saw that with Councillor Roberts and his car parking consultation. We did far more than the law asked us to, but for some people that still wasn't enough.
I think if I can just say, I mean, it would be a fairly simple addition to the process for officers to say to local councillors, we're doing this consultation in your area, do you have anything to add? So that the ward councillors were included in that process specifically. But I'll leave that, and Councillor Green
if I could just, it comes back to, you know, we had this with with exactly the same with the car parking. You know, it went through cabinet, it was signed off by council, we advertised, we'd leafleted so many houses, and yet we still had ward councillors coming back and saying, well, nobody asked me, and without wishing to be overly robust, I would say that if something in your patch is happening and it's gone through cabinet and it's gone through council and it's in, you know, the capital programme, there's a responsibility on the individual councillor as well to get involved. And as I said, to be fair, this is two councillors who did get involved. Maybe their involvement just came a bit late in the process. Ideally, it would have been, you know, if it had come a bit earlier. But we, as I say, we've listened to what they've said, we've listened to what residents said, and that means we're delivering this improvement slightly later than we thought we would do. And as I said earlier, if that means we get a red on one quarterly report, then I'm happy for us. I'm not happy for us to have the red, but I'm happy to take I'm happy to take the red for the sake of doing what the residents and the councillors wanted.
Councillor Green's got a subsidiary question.
It's not a question, it's a comment, Mr Chairman. It's just a comment about the designation of where Lever House Green is. Yes, it is in Farrington East Ward, but it's very definitely Leyland, not Farrington. So the report is actually correct.
Thank you very much. Councillor King.
Can I take you to page 44 on the median workplace earnings? So we've got the action plan on there, which includes grants, which I'm sure many businesses will welcome, probably need in current circumstances. But how is it that it's decided who gets a grant, and do we measure what the outcome is?
I don't know. There you go. Do you know? Oh, there you go. That's why she's here.
Yes, so obviously the economic development team process the grants. It's, you know, determined by the head of service, but obviously there is a criteria that's required to be met in terms of like the different grants that we offer. And yes, we absolutely do obviously monitor like the outputs like from those grants, and we do try to you know, produce like case studies like of, you know, those businesses who we've supported and the way we've supported them, and obviously like, you know, how that has sort of like helped them and what it's delivered in terms of output. So yeah, we absolutely do monitor that internally.
Councillor Green. Oh, sorry, Councillor
Yeah,
King.
so just on the action plan, it also references skills and training, and in light of all the news on the 1 million young NEETs across the country, then I was having a look back on the skills roadshow that I always saw for SRBC. I looked online, and there was all the information for what happened in 2024, 2025. I can't see anything about 2026. So in the spirit of being a council that's not slowing down, Am I right in assuming that we've already got a date booked in for 2026?
I'll have to double check that and get back to you.
I have to say, we talking about not slowing down. We've got an economic strategy now. We've got an economic strategy working group that's chaired by somebody from Edge Hill, and we work with Chorley, the Chamber of Commerce are on that strategy group, Runshaw College, the schools. So we are definitely being proactive around that area. We'll find out if there's a date. I can't imagine we won't be doing one in 2026.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Yeah, just a quick one, Chairman, if I may. So in terms of the grants, what is the source of funding for that? How much is internal and how much is external?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I could give you an exact figure. A lot of it is funded from the UK SPF. But in terms of, I mean, you asked quite a specific figure. We'll have to try and get that for you.
Thank you very much. Councillor King.
Yeah, so just on the back of the roadshow, because I do think it is important that that's in the diary, but then there's also local employers that are saying that despite the fact that there's this 1 million number of needs, they are also struggling to find the right staff, whether that's the number of applications or whether it's the right skills. So are the council doing anything to help local employers match local roles with local skills?
So I know that our economic development team work really closely with people like Runshaw and Newman to make sure that the courses that they're offering marry up with the skills gaps that we've got. I could probably get that team to give you a fuller answer on that, but they are a very, very proactive team who are working right across both South Ribble and Chorley. It's a joint team, but they are very busy. Yeah, and it's quite a specific question that's not referenced in the report, but happy to get you a response.
Thank you. If I can turn you over to page 45, please. In the box on the left, there is a figure in the second paragraph about nearly 87% of businesses are micro businesses. I presume that's 87% of the businesses in the borough, but they're all micro businesses. It might be more instructive to consider what proportion of the economics of the borough are represented by those 86.9%. What I'm really saying, does this figure actually hide other things that could give us more explanation of the balance? Because those micro businesses might be so micro that they're only 10% of the economics of the borough, or they are 13% of the employees of the borough. Does that make sense? So, see what I'm trying to ask?
I do see what you're trying to ask. Might it be more instructive? It might be. Can we collect that information easily? I don't know, but we can certainly ask for future reports.
Just a suggested improvement, I think. And as this is a key organisations indicator for us, what can you do to improve that? You'll come back to us. Thank you very much. If I can move on to page 61, we're due to deliver a programme to support the start-up of cooperative businesses. How has the Cooperative Council's Innovation Network been involved in that programme?
We have been in discussions with that organisation, and clearly I've got a couple of cabinet members, well, more than a couple, who are really keen on this. But it's one of those aspirations that you'd like to have and that you can work towards, but it's not something we can impose on anybody. We need people to come to us as well to say, we're interested in launching a cooperative. Can you support us in this? And I think even our neighbours in Preston who've been on this path a lot longer than us have found that it's all well and good encouraging and saying you'll be supportive, but getting cooperatives to come forward, potential cooperatives, isn't that easy. That's not to say we shouldn't continue to promote and support that where it happens, but I think it's a model that a lot of people in this country don't understand, and so we'll continue to try and support it, but encourage it, but getting people to come forward is not always that easy.
I was wondering whether there's anything we might do proactively, for example, something on our website that says, are you interested in setting up a co-op as an alternative way of running your business, or even a workshop that we invite people to about working with the network on, it might be a bigger area than just us, but how can we be proactive when you consider that national government has a priority to double the size of the cooperative sector in our economy? How do we as a borough fit in with that? And is there anything from national government to give us help on how we might promote it in the borough? Just some things that might be thought of.
So obviously, just in terms of the point around the Cooperative Council's Innovation Network, the council is a member of that network, so we're very engaged, obviously, with the work. We're very linked in, obviously, with like other members like across that network. It's particularly, prominent in terms of like sharing of good practice. They do a lot of like policy labs as well, where you can actually apply like for some funding if you wanted to test an idea, but there's an opportunity for councils like to work together and support like some of those areas. So we are very engaged with the network itself. I think in terms of like our approach around like cooperative like business models, as the leader sort of like rightly pointed out, it is quite difficult obviously for businesses to want to opt for that model, but we have run a training programme. We have done a workshop where we invited different stakeholders obviously to come and hear about those like different business models. So we have done that. I will say it probably wasn't as well as attended as we'd like, but I think, to get some participants there is a start. We will obviously look to continue like doing that. I think one of the success stories from that was actually a group that did attend. We've ended up working with them, and we've set up like a new cooperative community interest like company, particularly around like food. So, whilst obviously the success isn't huge, I think in terms of, like identifying a group that wants to, set up a cooperative business and, was working like with them, and we've seen some success there. I think that's a really positive story, and obviously we will continue, to identify those opportunities. As the leader said earlier, the economic development team, they're very much in touch, like with businesses and speaking to local people, and so there's always the opportunity to have those conversations around like those cooperative models and the benefits of that and what that brings. So like I said, we'll continue to do that, and we are looking at refreshing like our community wealth building framework, so we're looking to launch that sort of in September this year, and hopefully that'll give us some like real clarity around what like a cooperative economy like means and how we can look to achieve that going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I take you to page 46, please? And this is one of the issues that Councillor Tomlinson set out in his introduction earlier. So page 46 shows that the average working days per year per employee lost through sickness absence has increased by almost 50% from the previous quarter and almost 50% from the previous year, the same quarter in the previous year. Obviously, this is a very concerning trend, and we are grateful for the additional information which has been provided in the supplement to the committee. But the main cause of sickness absence appears to be stress and anxiety, and whilst the action plan includes some support for members of staff who are experiencing stress and anxiety, what are we doing as a council to reduce the causes of stress and anxiety before these become an issue?
Thanks, and you're right, it is concerning, and that's one of the things that led to me specifically asking for these figures to be disaggregated, so that we could see exactly where it is, and some of it is clearly what I referred to before. It's street scene and waste. It's interesting that the age profile in street scene tends to be quite high, so the risk of musculoskeletal injuries is higher. But the stress one is a worry. It is a worry. I would suggest that this is not a particularly overly stressful place to work. We try to look after our staff, and so it's really important that we drill down into this. I haven't got an easy answer. We do, obviously we do lots of work with staff, return to work interviews, keeping in touch with people who are off long-term sick. But it is undoubtedly a real concern, and that's why we've said to our directors we need to get a grip and find out what's going wrong. I haven't got an easy answer to it at the moment. You've heard the government talking about stress and anxiety, certainly since COVID has become much more prevalent, and at the moment I don't think anyone's got an easy answer to it. But I like to think we look after our staff. I think this is a place where you should be proud to work, and so if we're getting stress and anxiety, it is a real worry, and it's a worry for the cabinet as well. It is, and I know that Councillor Unsworth in particular, who's street scene and waste and the environment, has been talking to the directors specifically about this very issue. I'm sorry that sounds horribly vague, and I don't like giving vague answers, but it's a problem that's not just affecting us, and I suggest it's a problem for which there is not an easy answer.
Sorry, can I just add? I mean, obviously, as the leader said, we are a very supportive organisation. I think in terms of like a lot of the wellbeing initiatives like that we have like in place, and we do have a lot. And I think it's about really like working with managers to make sure that those are promoted to staff and that they are using obviously some of those initiatives at their disposal, and really sort of like focusing on that early intervention. And that is one of the things like that our human resources services is trying to do, obviously with managers, is making sure that they're aware of what is at their disposal, obviously to support staff, and making sure that they're having those early conversations and making sure that they are referring people to those like services like and initiatives like as early as possible.
Okay, yeah, thank you. If I can come back and yes, I mean some of the answer has been vague, but on this occasion I actually applaud your frankness, because it is a tricky issue. But I think collectively we need to find a way of taking this forward. I've got some further questions, if I may. So again, on the preventative health theme, what is being done to reduce the risk of musculoskeletal problems in the workplace?
I think most of all our staff who have physical jobs will be trained appropriately, and will be supported to work in a safe manner. And you can see, we do offer occupational health support for people who may be suffering, but the nature of the work also, we ask our waste collecting people to go out in literally all weathers. They're a fantastic team who do fantastic work. My recycling wasn't collected on time last week, and it's the first time I can ever remember it happening. But it was done. We got a message to say we're sorry, the van broke down, and we'll collect it first thing tomorrow, and it was done. They run a fantastic service, but we have to just accept it's the nature of the job. The nature of the job means there's bound to be more people suffering from coughs and colds and illness that you get from working outside, and they are carrying or dragging along bins, and it's physical work, it's physical work. So lots of training, lots of support, but I think the nature of the job just means that you are more likely to suffer that kind of illness than somebody perhaps who's sat in our planning department in a nice warm office, sat at a computer screen. They'll be prone to other things, obviously, but it's just the nature of the work means you're more likely to suffer that kind of illness.
Thank you, which leads me nicely on to my next question. So, how do the figure, you've highlighted that the figures obviously are distorted to some extent by street scene and communities, etc. So how do those figures compare with other similar occupations, and how do they compare with the figures for the private sector in similar occupations?
I don't know if we've done that work. I mean, I'm happy for us to go out and do that kind of benchmarking. We tend to benchmark ourselves against similar local authorities. I'm sure that information is relatively easy to get hold of. And again, I mean, we can go away and find that out for you.
We have actually done a piece of work looking at around comparing ourselves to other councils, particularly where, you know, they've got in-sourced or outsourced waste services. My computer's just crashed, so I actually can't just get access to the information right now, but happy to circulate that information because we have looked at that. I think as well, just on the point that the leader was saying around obviously the conditions like that these people are working in, I think it's also fair to say that we do actually have an ageing workforce as well, like in those particular roles. So that is something that we're really mindful of, and we are obviously, like, you know, looking at some of that data and how obviously, like, you know, we can support our ageing like workforce and address that. So that is something that we are mindful of.
Thank you. If that could be circulated, that would be helpful, and also taking up the leader's suggestion that some benchmarking could be done with the private sector. That could be useful as well. I mean, we are not the private sector at the end of the day, but if we can learn from what they are doing to try to reduce these figures, I think that will be helpful, first of all, for our staff, and secondly, in terms of outcomes. Similarly, how are we actually engaging with the trade unions to improve the targets?
So before I come to that, can I just say, having an ageing workforce has its disadvantages clearly, but for me it's a sign of a good employer. If people come to work here and stay, then that is a sign that we are doing something right. Of course, you know, a healthier workforce would have a lower median age, but it is a sign that people come to work here and value the job that they've got and stay, and whether that's an advantage or not, I think it's worth commenting on. When it comes to working with the trade unions, I do meet with the trade unions. They know that we are both supportive of their staff but ambitious for this council, and I think that's a balance that's about right. And I also know that Councillor Unsworth has been meeting with them and has raised some of the concerns that have been raised tonight. So I'd like to think that our relationship with Unison, which is the main union here, is a positive but realistic one. And I know I actually went to their AGM and did a Q&A. And there were lots of questions about what does LGR mean for this council. So clearly some of the staff have got those questions as well. But I think we have a healthy, robust, professional relationship with the unions, and long may that continue.
My final question, Chairman, if I may. So what arrangements are in place for those employees on long-term sickness when they're not able to return to work?
I think some of that is answered in the report. Clearly that's a sensitive issue and is dealt with on a case-by-case basis, but sometimes it's simply not possible for someone to come back to work, and when that point is reached, we come to agreements with people on how they can be helped to leave the organisation in the way that suits both them and, sorry, them and us is a horrible phrase. As soon as I started saying it, I knew I shouldn't. How is supportive to both the organisation and the employee. But it's an inevitability in a small number of cases that no matter how much we support people, they won't be able to come back to the job that they've been doing. And then we can have a discussion about, can we offer you another role, or is this something that needs to be addressed? It does get addressed, and it does happen. Thankfully not that often, but it does happen. And I'm sure it says somewhere in the report about the fact that is a way that sometimes long-term sickness is dealt with.
Thank you. Councillor Bollenberg.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, you answered some of this, but I'd just like to drill down a bit more, and it's about how you're engaging with the unions. I noticed before you mentioned that you're working with HR managers, you've got an employee assistance programme, I think it might be called, and occupational health, showing me roots. What I'm not got, but you have touched on, is a real sense of how you're working with the unions to support their members, but also increase, or rather decrease the numbers of sick days. What's actually happening in that area?
I meet with the unions on a relatively regular basis. They know that as an administration we are supportive of them and the support that they can offer to their staff. I have to say, as a politician, I'm not involved with the granularity, is that a word? Granularity of the work that goes around supporting staff with occupational health, I'll give it its full title, and the support that we give to individual members of staff. So I think that my relationship with the unions is very much of a, we're on your side, but we have to remember we're all in this to deliver good outcomes for our residents, and as long as we know that, they know that they have my support. But if I'm really honest, I don't get involved with that day-to-day stuff that I think you're asking about.
Sorry, just to come in on that, obviously we do have a proactive relationship with the trade unions, and we do meet with them like on a regular basis, and I would say that they are actively like involved obviously in case management and ensuring that obviously we're consistently applying like our improving attendance like policy. We have just reviewed that policy and they are very much like engaged obviously in reviewing those policies and making sure, you know, that they are fit for purpose and that they are going to help us obviously like in addressing like, you know, some of these issues. So I think in terms of like that engagement, you know, we have got a good relationship, and we absolutely, you know, take on board and welcome like the trade unions like feedback in how we manage some of these situations.
Thank you. We've spent a bit of time on that, but I hope that's seen as an aspect of the concern of the council for those that we employ who are in difficult circumstances because of ill health. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. If I may roll us forward to page 70. A couple of us raised this query, and it's I'm slightly embarrassed because you've got a new indicator there and we're querying sort of the rationale for it. It says the metres squared of employment space, floor space created. We just wondered, wouldn't it be better to see how much was not only created but also occupied, to just demonstrate job creation?
I'm happy to take that feedback to the economic development team for their consideration.
Yeah, just we were thinking it's better to have occupied space than unoccupied space. Just a final question for you on this particular part of our agenda. Congratulations. The number of days for installation of disabled facilities grants has gone down from 127 to 68. That's a really significant change, and we're grateful for those who are involved in that part of our work to see that that has happened. For people who have who need those disabled facilities, I guess even 68 is going to see a long, it's a couple of months. Are we able to see that reduced any further?
We would always like to see that to be as low as it can be. Obviously, with some things, you know, if it's a wet room, then there's going to be a longer time lag on that. But if it's putting up a couple of grab bars, then it's our, as an administration, our view that that should be done, you know, within a few days. I've always argued that if someone asks for a grab bar in a shower, they don't need an OT assessment, because you don't ask for a grab bar in a shower unless you need one. Because, you know, none of us are sat here aspiring to have a grab bar put in a shower or a ramp put up on our front doorstep. If somebody wants that, it's because they need it. And so the quicker we can make that happen and the quicker we can get the grant spent, then that's what we should be doing. But is there option to get that figure? There's always options to get it lower, but it will always depend on the mix of the applications that we get and how big and complicated they might be. But smaller adaptations, we really should just be getting on and doing them.
Thank you. I mean, really, we put that in because we did think it was something that needed to be congratulated and passed on. It's a really significant reduction. Are there any members who are not on the committee who wish to ask any questions? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. It's just about the sickness, and obviously it's always worrying when people are not well. We hope they get better as soon as they can. With the government's new trial in Lancashire, with sending people, instead of getting a fit note, to somewhere else, how would that impact on the administration side of that? Because obviously if you don't get a fit note but someone's off unwell or going through a process, I just sort of wondered how that would impact on whether we would be able to sort of fully report that, or would there be any difficulties with a number of people? And the risk we have with unions elsewhere is that they'll start using your own occupational health people to do that as well as medical professionals.
I think it remains to be seen. I think we'll have to, in the horrible phrase, we'll suck it and see. And if there's a significant change happening, then we'll have to react accordingly. But at this stage, it's really difficult to answer.
Are we aware of that change?
The change to fit notes, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Do you have anything more to say? Thank you. Are there any members of the public? No, there are no members of the public here besides ourselves. We need to formulate some recommendations, and I look to our Head of Democratic Services.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the themes the committee might like to recommend this evening. The committee thanks the Leader and Director for attending and answering questions. The committee commends the positive performance and progress made in the fourth quarter and congratulates the staff teams for all their work highlighting the Green Waste Project and disabled adaptations improvements. The committee welcomes the assurance that steps are being taken to improve corporate strategy and organisational indicators and look forward to a written response. The committee asks that ward members be engaged earlier into key projects affecting their area. The committee is grateful for the offer of further information on the Skills Roadshow for 2026, funding sources for the business grant schemes, and also skills matching support. The committee welcomes the offer of reviewing the way that the micro-business indicator is represented in future reports. The committee shares the Leader's concern with staff sickness absence figures and looks forward to further information on sickness benchmarking with other councils with insourced waste services and the private sector. And finally, the committee asks that the employment floor space created indicator be reviewed to include employment created. Thank you, Chair.
Are we happy with those? Are we happy as a committee with those? Would you please raise your hand so that we see? That is approved. Thank you very much for those. I'm always amazed how quickly you are able to put those recommendations into sensible words for us to vote on at the end of our items of business. We move on to the revenue budget outturn, and I'm grateful to Councillor Matthew Tomlinson for standing in for his colleague, Councillor Wesley Roberts, who is on holiday at the moment. Thank you to Caroline for accompanying you for the first part of the business, and we now see a change of officer support arriving.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Councillor Roberts, apologies for reasons we don't need to go into. He did have to reschedule a holiday, which means he can't make it tonight. Can I just say I think he's doing a terrific job. He's really good, Wes, at asking those difficult questions. And I'm sure if you've got any difficult questions, Wes would be better at answering than I'm going to be. But I did perform this role before, so I've kind of got a rough idea what this all means. If you forgive me, I want to just talk to both reports, both the revenue and the capital. I think on the revenue budget, you'll see that actually we've underspent significantly more than we were predicting at the end of Q3. I've always been of the view that whilst an underspend is better for the organisation than an overspend, we ought to look at why we're underspending and whether that's affecting performance or not. Now, clearly from the report we've just had, performance across the council remains good, and so that being the case, that underspend gives me a little less cause for concern. There's quite a wide range of reasons why we've underspent right across all the different directorates, and they're itemised in the report. But it means we're a relatively healthy place in the revenue budget. Clearly, we've got challenges ahead, certainly when we get to next financial year, but maybe we can talk about that at a future meeting while we concentrate on looking back tonight. The capital programme, again, we're getting lots done. Nothing ever changes with the capital programme. There's slippage, and I know I've said before when I've presented this report, I tried to give the committee some confidence that, the year end is a split moment in time, and if something is delivered 3 days later than we said it would be, it slips out of the capital programme and it looks like we've not been doing anything. But all the things that we committed to, we remain committed to, and some of the things that were down as having slipped, we will have already delivered on or will be well on delivering. So we've got an ambitious capital programme still. We got a lot done last year, but we didn't get everything done as quickly as we hoped it would be done. And I think in the main, that explains most of the slippage in the capital programme. That being said, I'm sure between the both of us, we'll endeavour to answer whatever questions your committee may have.
Thank you very much. On page 79, paragraph 4, please could you talk us through the reason why we are having to contribute £720,000 towards local government reorganisation in Lancashire, and when the changes are being imposed by the government?
Well, the second part of your question is the $64 million question, when the changes. We are expecting an announcement before recess, which leaves us about 7 weeks, something like that, 8 weeks for the government to make its announcement. We have had something called the Structural Change Order Letter, which is another part of the process, which invites councils to write back to say what we think the what they call the steering committees. No, before the shadow. So there will be joint committees set up. I think that's what they're called now, thank you. Joint committees will be set up as soon as we know what the footprint of the councils will be. So the government has been asking us what we think those joint committees should look like. To be fair, they'll only be in place for 7 or 8 months, because then there will be elections to the shadow council next May, and those councillors will then be tasked with making sure the new council's ready for 2028, as we discussed. This is going to cost, we think, across the county about £30 million in terms of officer time and work, and it's been agreed across the councils that the county will pick up the significant amount of that, and then the 2 unitaries as well. But there will be some staff costs and admin costs from South Ribble and all the other district councils. What the district councils have agreed to do across the 12 of them is to pick up the money that was left after the county and the unitary have put their money in, and then agree an individual figure for each council. Forgive me, I'm working this through in my head as I speak. An individual figure for each council based on that council's council tax base. So Ribble Valley will spend less on it than we do, but Preston and Lancaster will spend quite a bit more than we do, because they're bigger councils with bigger council tax bases. So that's why the money's being put to one side. I think it's prudent to do so. There will be work, if we're honest, that's already being spent on looking at local government reform. And if we want to do this right, there will be a cost to it.
There's no money coming from the government to support the change.
There's a limited amount being announced, I think around 900,000 per new unitary, and obviously we don't know how many new unitaries there'll be, but fundamentally government have said the councils have to fund it from their existing resources.
So where would we have found the 360,000 if we'd not underspent on budgets last fiscal year?
Well, there's a range of places, if we're honest. You know, we've got quite a healthy reserve fund. We've got a range of reserves. We've still got 10, 12, 13 million pound. Money can always be found for these things, but we're in the fortunate position that we did understand, underspend. We manage our finances quite well, and one of the things I've always been confident about in my 6 years as finance portfolio holder and now a year as the leader, we're a council that's reasonably well buffered for any shocks that come, and so something like this, would we prefer not to spend it on this? Of course we would, but had we not underspent, and we did, so we've got the money, but had we not, we would have been able to find this money from one of our reserve pots, I'm sure.
Thank you. Norfolk County Council have, according to one press report, told their staff to down tools, was the word in the press report, on all matters relating to LGR. We have not heard of anything in this neck of the woods. Is there every indication that the County Council, who have the same political administration as Norfolk, are likely to continue to cooperate in this?
Well, you're probably asking the wrong person the question. I would say that downing tools on something that the government says is going to happen is the height of irresponsibility. If the government says local government reform is coming and you're one of the councils involved and you throw your hands up in horror and say we're having nothing to do with it, the risk is that the councils around you who are prepared to engage in it will get to decide what's going to happen. And so whether you're a council that's fully supportive of local government reorganisation, and I'm not aware of one in Lancashire, we've all been sort of guided towards this with differing levels of enthusiasm, but my view is, as the leader of this council, if this is going to happen to us, we need to engage with it positively and make sure that this council's in the best possible place it can be, to make sure that in a perfect world, our residents won't notice on day one that we've moved to a new council. I'm hoping that long term there must be some benefits in all this, even if it's just not us and the county not talking to each other about stuff we should be. But in an ideal world, on vesting day, our residents shouldn't notice. If you do a visit from adult social care, you should still get a visit. If your bins are meant to be emptied, they should still be emptied. You know, if you're due to pay your council tax, it should still be taken out of your bank account, as I'm sure Neil's desperately hopeful it will be. But, you know, in an ideal world. So we need, once we know this is happening and we know what's happening, it's our responsibility to engage in it positively and make sure that that transition is as smooth as possible.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Yes, so on page 82, the third bullet point, the committee has mentioned the future of South Ribble Museum and Exhibition Centre on quite a number of occasions now, and we've not got an answer on what the future is, and it's been closed to the public now for 6 years. Could you update us on what is the future of the museum?
The reason there's not been an answer is because, if we're honest, we don't know what the future of that building is. We've spent quite a bit of money on making it waterproof and damp proof because it's grade 2 listed and it needed a lot of work doing to it. It is now safe from the elements. It's not going to deteriorate any further. I visited last week actually with Councillor Farnworth. In its present state, it causes us real concerns about opening it again to the public. And that's because the world has changed and the amount of money we'll have to spend on it to make it DDA compliant. There won't be that many councillors around who've been in it, but those of us who remember it, there are awkward little steps. There are spaces where you simply couldn't allow the public to go, and it's causing Councillor Farnworth and our new head of culture a real headache. So we are looking after the exhibits that were in there, everything that was previously. Well, it was never all displayed because the building's just not big enough to display all the photographs and things that they've got going back. Councillor Farnworth's view is that the things that have been on display in that little museum ought to be out in the community. So whether there's a space in New Leyland Market, whether we can display some of the artefacts in here or at our leisure centres, and actually take the things out into the community rather than it being kept in a little building on Church Road in Leyland, that the footfall, even when it was open, was quite minimal. So I think we're moving to a different model of displaying what we've got. I'm going to be really honest with you, we haven't made our minds up what's happening with the building, and it's proving to be quite a challenge.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. Can I take you to bullet point number 6 on page 82, please? Okay, which relates to the funding for economic development and business support. And could I ask what happens to the money that hasn't come from the council's budget as a result of utilising the UK Shared Prosperity Fund funding?
Sorry. So essentially that contributes to the underspend. I appreciate there was a question earlier on business grants and use of UK SPF, and that links to that question. Clearly UK SPF has ended now. There is some money in reserves for the continuation of business grants. There's a figure in there, I think around 300,000, but essentially it contributes to the underspend.
Yeah, thank you. So shouldn't that amount of money actually be ring-fenced to support economic development and businesses, because there is a significant need out in the community?
I mean, financially, there's no requirement to ring fence it because clearly what is being spent is council budget that's flexible and can be used anywhere that it needs to be. Clearly there's an amount of money that's been in reserves for some time and not utilised because we've utilised UK SPF. So that pot of money has stayed relatively untouched. I don't think it's touched at all this year. In terms of utilising, I would envisage that we would utilise that money first.
Thank you.
Okay, going on to the next point of can I take you over the page to bullet point number 9 on page 83? Talking about grants carrying forward. So, of the grants received, are these ring-fenced for particular uses? And the grant balances currently stand at over £1 million. Are there any risks around clawback?
So in respect to the grants being ring-fenced, it differs from grant to grant. So we examine the conditions of each grant and make sure that we are complying with the relevant regulations. Different grants do come with different regulations. If they aren't ring-fenced and we can spend those monies, match those against existing resources, they will go into our council reserves and can be used more flexibly. Where they're not, we will continue. There's no risk at the moment in terms of payback. We speak to government regularly. As we approach year end, we ensure we account for them. Because of the big numbers, the auditors always examine these numbers and how we treat them at year end. I think in terms of the funding, significant funding comes with these. Often what we find is that in particular the communities have existing things in place to fund. So there's often things that we've already funded with our existing budget that these things contribute towards. So we do tend to find that we carry a lot forward. I think there is a plan now over the coming years to spend this money. So there is an active plan to kind of make sure that we're not continuously carrying it forward.
Thank you. Page 86, or the second bullet point down, mentions a council house building fund. Well, something to do with 25,000 receipt. Could you explain what this is? Does it go towards, for example, the Ockleshall House project mentioned on page 105?
Thanks. I wish Ockleshall House was only going to cost us 25,000, Chairman. So it is I mean, it's great that we're getting some funding, but this is quite a tiny little pot of money. What I would point you to is that in our budget for this year, we put £1 million towards affordable housing schemes. We've just got a grant from the government, which is going to allow us to deliver Ockleshall House at relatively small contribution from the council taxpayers of South Ribble. So in terms of that, you know, I think, I don't know what, it's an underspend. Would it be a member of staff or, yeah.
So we received a grant of around 150,000 and in year we'd employed a member of staff to contribute as part of that. Some of the grant was actually carried forward because of the timings of it. But yeah, it was actually across planning and property and developing the plans for housing.
Okay, thank you. So it's not for a micro house. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 99, this local government reorganisation implementation fund. You mentioned earlier some of the funding that's going into the actual structures leading up to whatever brave new world we have. Basically, the government is forcing us to do this. Either it's a good thing or it isn't. I can see benefits and disbenefits. But then we are paying for it to some extent at least. There are a load of things there on page 99 that will need to be funded that we wouldn't otherwise have been thinking in terms of having to do. And you mentioned reserves. Is it really a situation then that we are just going to have to pay down some of our reserves in order to do this work for the government's project?
Essentially, that's the case. obviously, the projection is this is going to save money over time, but up front, there are going to be costs. And there is going to be a year, for instance, when there'll be a South Ribble and a Lancashire County Council, but there'll also be a shadow or shadow councils who are working to set themselves up and be ready, but won't be collecting any council tax. The shadow council won't be collecting council tax because South Ribble and Lancashire will still be doing all the things that we do with council tax. So all that work, and there's an election to fund, you know, so all that work will have a cost to it, and the money will have to come from somewhere. The hope and the aspiration is, and all the indication is, that in the longer term, unitarisation will save money, but there's going to be some upfront costs, and we have to pay for it. You know, someone has to pay for it, and the government says in the main, it's us.
But beyond that, we've also got the responsibility of doing all the work. No, I'm not going to make a political point, but am I getting this right?
Thank you for not making this about politics, but you are right, yes.
Just a couple of other questions. There's mention on the middle of the page for an assurance framework. Is that a publicly available document? It's at the first line of the third paragraph.
It's not a public document. What it is aiming to do is, as directors of finance across Lancashire, clearly the fund needs to be held in an actual single pot that's going to be held by Lancashire County Council. What the assurance framework is to assure us as Section 151s that money is treated correctly, the correct governance is in place, allocated correctly, all the controls we would have in our own authorities, but in a pot of money that clearly is going to be within a single authority, but for all authorities.
Who scrutinises how that is spent?
I mean, fundamentally, it sits within Lancashire County Council's accounts, so in theory it is open to scrutiny there. There will be some internal audit examination of it. I suspect that there will be significant scrutiny from the rest of us as Section 151s as well. I mean, we will ask for that information. It will go to Chief Executive Boards. It will potentially come to Lancashire Leaders Boards as well, so there will be significant kind of examination of that money.
Yeah, so who actually says we've got this fund, we need to spend this much, who gives the approval?
So in terms of approvals, the approval process in terms of the governance of the approval sits within Lancashire County Council's constitution, because it's fundamentally their money. But in terms of the process, there is already set up a Lancashire Finance Group which has a sponsor and a lead, and there will be some element of a person outside of Lancashire County Council having an influence on that before a decision's made.
And is that political oversight of the process?
So in terms of political oversight of the spending approvals, so the political oversight of the spending approvals, clearly, if they're within the normal remit of spend, then it would follow whatever normal approval there is at Lancashire County Council. I suspect the size and scale that we're talking about, most decisions will be below the kind of threshold at County Council to go to a full then significant separate decision. So
we as a council have no oversight of that. It's entirely with the LCC, besides the fact that our Section 151 officers are involved.
Yes, so there'll be oversight via myself, there'll be oversight via the Chief Exec's board, there will be oversight by the various LGR boards, but directly in terms of spend, that our contribution will be to a central pot.
And again, who appoints any staff that are appointed or to do the work that we're talking about?
So again, it depends how that works in practice. So there's a chance that some of those staff come from Lancashire authorities. They may well be seconded into the programme. There's a chance that some of that work is commissioned. Some of that would obviously be commissioned by Lancashire County Council. So it slightly depends where the staff come from and how they kind of operate in the project. Clearly, some of us will be needing to do it as part of our day jobs as well as we approach the time, but there will be some clearly dedicated staff because it's a significant undertaking.
And there's mention of member allowances. Who decides what those are?
So I'm looking at my colleague who's head of Democratic. So there will need to be an independent board that will need to set those allowances.
The reason for the questions is ultimately these are very short-term things until the election next year, when there will be a shadow authority which will put in place its own scrutiny of that side of things. But in the meantime, the question for us is, how is scrutiny exercised over these temporary structures? And it's quite a short time, but it's still necessary for there to be scrutiny of such functions. There would be scrutiny of them were it within our remit. I don't know how the scrutiny functions work if this is treated purely as an LCC matter.
Just to be clear, sorry, on that, I'm only talking about the £30 million part. Clearly, the overall programme is far-reaching.
That's our point, really. There is a far-reaching thing going on, and how is scrutiny to be exercised?
And can I just give the committee a commitment from me that should I be on one of the joint committees, then a report will be coming back from that committee, both to this scrutiny committee, and I would imagine I would want to do something for full council as well, just to keep everybody engaged as much as we can be. We don't know what the shape of those joint committees will be like. There will be someone from this council. There may be two, depending on what the government come back with. But that will probably be me. That will probably be me, I would think, and I would be more than happy to come back and to report to the membership of this council as to the progress of the work that the joint committees are doing.
Clearly, there is going to be a major communications need between the members of councils across the county and what is going on, because at the moment I think most members of this council are unaware of quite a lot of what is going to be necessary and what is going on. We hope there will be some thought put into how that is best communicated. Thank you. Are there any questions from people who are not members of the committee? And there's no members of the public, so do we have some recommendations formulated, please?
Thank you, Chair. Some of the themes that the committee might like to recommend. The committee thanks the Leader and Director of Finance for attending and answering questions. The committee looks forward to receiving an update on the future of the South Rural Museum and Exhibition Centre and its collection. And finally, the committee is grateful for the Leader's commitment to ensure all members are kept updated on local government reorganisation and the proposed joint committee. Thank you, Chair.
Are we happy with those recommendations? Thank you, that's carried. You've already given us an introduction to the next item of business. Are you happy for us to continue? So on page 102, paragraph 11, capital budget variations and reprofiling of the capital budget has improved significantly on previous years. What are your plans to make the capital budget more realistic and manage expectations moving forwards?
I think clearly I've been at committee at various occasions and we've talked about slippage. I think it's very difficult. I mean, to take some examples from the table on table 2 this year, there's £4.7 million of slippage across maybe 20 or 30 lines. I think 2 of those lines are significant, one of which leisure centres is delayed partly due to things outside of our control. So we're waiting on Electricity North Western connections to our leisure centres, at which point the cost goes out quite quickly when those come in. So it is quite difficult in that respect. I think in terms of the waste fleet, that's an example of probably where we could have been a bit better in terms of forecasting when that came in. I think the reality was that the food waste fleet clearly came first for everyone, and the delivery of those vehicles came as a priority, whereas this spend was on non-food waste fleet. In terms of getting better, it is a constant dialogue with our property and our our kind of parks team in particular, and understanding those specific timescales. I don't know that on a lot of them I would have done a lot different, if I'm honest, this year. I think the reality was that last quarter shifted a couple of significant ones, and then it was a multitude across various schemes with nothing really standing out.
Thank you. Councillor Bollenberg.
Thank you, Chair. If I can draw your attention to page 105, paragraph 20, it says paddle at the tennis centre. Could you talk us through what this figure is?
We might talk about this a little bit later on as well in the report. So Cabinet approved a capital contribution for installation of paddle facilities at the South Ribble Tennis Centre. So this is just the increase in the programme that was reflected in that Cabinet report.
So what actually is it going to be used on? Is it the installation of the whole course?
Yeah, so it is the capital build inside the leisure centres. So clearly, while we have a leisure company that runs our leisure centres, the buildings themselves remain in the council's control. So capital works for them is the council's cost.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. If I could draw us down to page 113. My question's about row 3, the electric vehicle charging points. There doesn't seem to be anything in the budget going forward. Have we used up our funds? Are we going to not install any more electric charging points?
So that was a specific programme that was grant funded, and that's the conclusion of what was available in respect of grant funding. In terms of future ones, there might be some within bigger schemes, but I'm not aware of a specific EV charging scheme.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Green.
Thanks, Chairman. On the same page, just past halfway down, there's a section of the parks and open spaces in which specific places are listed, but these don't seem to be exhaustive. Do we have a category for any sites which are not actually listed? So to give you an example, in my ward, for instance, there's an area adjacent to Nixon Lane and Middlefield. So would that be included in some other box which isn't listed, or are we missing areas altogether?
So anything that has a capital budget is listed in the list. I think there is a scheme which is called Smaller Parks and Play Areas, which captures some much smaller spend within there. But everything that has a capital budget is included in there. I am aware of that, so I know it exists somewhere, but I suspect it's in that programme, but I'll be 100% certain of that, but I am aware that that does exist.
Thank you. It's where my grandchildren play as well, and it's something I'm interested in as well. You've talked about the slippage. How much of the slippage is on capital budget is around project management not being as effective as it might have been? And if that is the case, is there a way of strengthening our approach?
I think we get asked that question every quarter. And as Neil said earlier, you know, it's something that we try and focus on as much as we can, but with the best will in the world, things do for a whole variety of reasons. And some of the slippage that you've seen, you know, it's £5,000 here, £6,000 there. Obviously, the cash figure is inflated by two big items that didn't go through on time. I'm not a project manager. I've never been a project manager, so I'm not going to try and give a technical answer. We always strive to be both optimistic and realistic about what we want to achieve, but sometimes was it events, dear boy, events.
I'm just, as we finish, I don't know whether this is actually a question I need to ask elsewhere, but there was a large piece of equipment bought during the project for the leisure centres that we didn't actually use. Has that been disposed of?
I'm pretty sure we sold it to our friends at Chorley Council, who wanted it for the leisure centre decarbonisation scheme. So all's well that ends well.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members who are not members of the committee? There are no members of the public. Can we have our recommendations, please?
Thank you, Chair. Some of the themes from the discussion tonight. The committee thanks the Leader and Director of Finance for attending and answering questions. The committee welcomes the improvement to the amount of the capital budget that has needed reprofiling and looks forward to improving in the future. The committee asks that consideration be given to further funding electric vehicle charging points as part of our commitment to climate change. Thank you, Chair.
Is everyone happy with those recommendations? Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, for both of you. I'm very grateful for the time. We realised the first one was quite a long thing, and we've managed to deal with the other ones much more quickly. We are just moving people around a little bit. We will be welcoming the Cabinet Member for Leisure, Health and Wellbeing and Council and Company, Councillor Claire Hunter, and also accompanying her Directors Jennifer Mullin and Neil Holton. Do you have any initial comments to make?
No, fire ahead.
Find the report whilst you're speaking. Sorry. Yeah. Just caught the pages, but they were stuck together. Could you talk us through the governance structure of the leisure company and its links to the council?
Okay, so South Ribble Leisure is the actual company. South Ribble Borough Council own the buildings and obviously own the company. So it is very confusing, really, to be honest. Does that make sense?
We're right in thinking that Jennifer Muller and Neil Holton are directors of that company, and you're here, I guess, in two different roles, one in terms of being directors and one in terms of being the officers of the council. Councillor King.
Yeah, so just so I'm clear on this, so just because when we've discussed the leisure company before, my understanding is that the directors here also sit as directors of the leisure company, but my understanding was that that business is not owned by the council. It's just got a match-up of directors. Is that correct?
It's a wholly owned leisure company, so it's wholly owned by the council. We are on the board, myself and Neil sit on the board, so operational decisions sit with ourselves, and the strategic direction of the company sits with the shareholders, which are the cabinet ultimately.
And are the directors in financial benefits of being the directors of that said business?
So as directors of the company, we're not paid anything by the company. We're paid for our employment at South Ribble Council.
Perfect. So this fairly does answer my question, therefore, which is, how is it that you manage a conflict of interest? Because being the directors of a company which is a recipient of subsidies by that they get from the directors of. Do you see what I'm saying? The directors of somewhere are giving the financial benefits to a place that you're also of, that you're working at. So how is it that it's governed to ensure that there isn't a conflict of interest?
I think it's a fair comment, and I think it's not always easy to make that distinction between the two things. I think fundamentally South Ribble Leisure Limited is a not-for-profit company. We work to the goals set by the council, and so clearly there is an element of no conflict in terms of our clarity of what the goal of the company should be, because as both directors of the council and directors of the company, we understand that that's what the direction of what the council wants. Clearly, in terms of some of the specific decisions, you have to understand what hat you are making that decision in. And there are times and occasions when we will say, actually, for the company, this is what is best, and represent that view in respect of the company. Certainly when we sit in as a board of directors, we are representing the company. I don't think conflicts come as commonly as you think in terms of the reality of it day to day. Operationally, most of the day-to-day decisions are allowing the leisure centres to function in the best possible way. Our goal is that the leisure company is successful. I think the council's goal is that leisure company is successful. So I don't think there's as many conflicts day to day as you would think. I think in respect of our decision-making powers, they're relatively limited to those operational day-to-day decisions. So I don't make the choice as to what the council subsidises the company. That comes to council as part of the full budget. So I think there is kind of that clear distinction, but I understand that it can be that way, particularly with local authority trading companies. It's a fairly common that a director of the council is also on the company.
And what role does Councillor Hunter have in terms of this? And do you mentioned the cabinet or the shareholders, is there any financial dividend that goes towards the cabinet?
No, absolutely none. The cabinet are the shareholders, so any big decisions for funding or anything like that will be brought to a cabinet shareholders meeting, and we will vote on whether that's accepted or not accepted. There is no financial benefit to me whatsoever. Wish there was. But no, I think, there is nothing really for the cabinet or for myself.
Councillor Bollenberg.
Thank you, Chair. On page 118, paragraph 9, the financial subsidy, the council subsidy decreased significantly over the last 3 years, which is positive. How does this compare when the leisure centre when the leisure was run by the Leisure Trust and by Serco? Because it's not easy to see from this.
I think it's a very difficult comparison to make, is the first thing I would say, because post-COVID, a lot of things changed. I think we pay the leisure company now less than we did Serco before. Now, clearly, there's inflationary factors, there's a lot of other factors in that, so a comparable sum of money would be difficult, because I suspect if Serco were sat here, they would have said, well, we would have equally made efficiencies to achieve something. But the amount of actual cash is less than it was when we were paying Serco prior to COVID.
I think if I remember correctly, we are far, far less now than we did. We're paying Serco. Was Serco 580 something, I think it was?
Yes, it was, yeah.
And basically we're paying at the moment 365. So we're under what Serco is, and we intend to carry on. Fingers crossed.
So that leads me on to my next question. What plans are there by the council to reduce that subsidy of 109k further?
We're looking at everything. We're doing a very holistic pull together now, where we're working with property services, we're working with HR, we're working with staffing, we're working with a big organisation, leisure cards. So basically, we are bringing it all together now, new IT system and everything else. And then basically what we're looking at is extra activities, sort of like pool days maybe, inflatable days, maybe even party days and such like that. So as we've got everything finalised with the decarbonisation, we will look at what else we can do to raise money basically and bring the subsidiary down. Does that make sense? Yeah?
So the answer is more income.
Thank you. If you turn over to page 119, paragraph 14, this may just be a piece of proofreading, really. There's reference made to cancer surgery. And in other parts of the report, there is reference made to cancer recovery rather than surgery. As a recipient of radiotherapy, I was offered this service, it was made known to me that there was this service. So is surgery the accurate word, and do you need to actually look at that one again?
We will have a look at that one again. Is cancer recovery. Generally, people are referred from a surgery service, but it could also include cancer recovery too.
I hoped that was the case. Is the NHS funding this?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. South Ribble Leisure Business Plan. We get used to seeing a vision, overall aims and objectives, and what we want to achieve. And if it's in there within that services summary, I'm missing it. I have a beef about having these things in every report anyway, but when you don't see them there, you think, is it missing? Have we forgotten it? Or is it just not appropriate for this?
Sorry, can you give me an example on that, David, what we're missing? What do you mean?
Statement of the vision. Sorry. A statement of the vision of the business. Most businesses have a vision statement of some kind. If you haven't, fine. Suits me, but often you get one. A statement of the overall aims and objectives of the company. They may be fairly obvious, but I would have expected them somewhere within that structure. It's just a thought.
I actually think we'll do that. We'll put something together and put it into the plan.
Thank you. Councillor King.
Sorry, just...
Oh, did you have a...
So, generally from a vision point of view, we're aligning with the council's vision. We've not, as a company, we haven't got a separate vision from the council. As part of the council vision for health and wellbeing, it's very much aligned to that. So that's why it isn't in there. It's the same as the council's. And we didn't see it was necessary to have something different from the council's vision.
It might not be different, it might just be a restating, but since it is a company in its own right. So, Bollenberg.
I think just to really build on what Dave was saying, Councillor Shaw, when you read it, it lacks what you want to achieve. We're not sure what you want to achieve from it. Now, I completely get that what you want to achieve is the aims of the council, but it just doesn't state that in there, and I think it needs to be in there to really bring it alive, because people may only ever read that in isolation.
Mm. Thank you. Councillor King.
Yeah, one point that kind of builds on the back of that is on page 127 on paragraph 4, where you reference your pricing policy. So kind of what is the aim here, and how is it that you're balancing the price to ensure that it's affordable to residents on low income, whilst also attempting to generate the revenue to be able to reinvest and keep the facility attractive for people to want to come back?
The fees and charges are set by the council rather than the company. So that's voted on in the budget. So I suppose it's a question for yourselves, really, when you vote on that.
But my question more is, so we get given a recommendation from the Cabinet saying this is what we believe we should set the pricing at. Why that? Where has that come from? Has this just been a finger in the air job, or is there actually a piece of work that goes into it that dictates why are we trying to price this at a certain level?
I think as part of the fees and charges work, and it is a nuance there that the council does set the fees and charges, even though it is part of the leisure company, that is part of the arrangement. I think there is a piece of work that goes on there. There is benchmarking clearly to local providers. I think there's also an understanding of who we are as a leisure company and who we're trying to compete with and who we're not trying to compete with in that pricing. Because I think that is an understanding that needs to be before you set any fees and charges. We have a lot of discussions about where the fees and charges should go or whether they shouldn't. I think they've fairly reasonably gone up in inflationary percentages. I think the other factor is the makeup of the fees and charges. So there's different ways. There's offers that take place. There's a lot of people pay via direct debit, but actually our goal would be to get more people on direct debit, even if that's slightly lower pricing than some of the offers, because that aids retention, and retention is almost as important as the price that you're charging someone. So there's a lot of discussion. There is benchmarking. There is looking at other places, but it's benchmarking against others who are similar. We don't pretend to compete with Nuffield Health. That's not our competitor really in the leisure company. So there is an understanding of that. There is a wide range of prices that go into kind of all the different sites. Some of them generate a lot of money. Some of them generate relatively small amounts of money. It's those core ones that we look at the most, because we don't, as a company, we're not for profit. It is there in our articles that we aren't for profit. So we're not attempting to maximise the yield. It's about, we appreciate the council's got budget problems. You talk about the two hats, but we appreciate the council's got budget problems. It's how do we increase them in a reasonable way to try and achieve those targets as well.
Yeah, and just to be clear that we did this year, it was an inflationary increase only.
Thank you, Councillor Bollenberg.
Sorry, I was just going to say a final one. It's just a comment, if anything, which is, I think, is where it comes back to this mission statement, which is, who are you for? Are you trying to run a leisure company that is affordable and tries to work for the benefit of the most amounts of residents as possible, or are you trying to create something which is better than X, Y, and Z? So being able to see something like that, I think it would just be really helpful to understand what is the purpose.
Councillor Bollenberg.
So just to expand on Councillor King's point there right at the end about are we trying to run a company, a leisure company that's affordable? What assurances do we have from this report that we are focusing on residents with low incomes? How are we targeting them? How are we making sure that they can still afford to come to and access these services?
I think only a couple of years ago we went through all the fees and charges. We found that some leisure centres were charging more than others. For some things they're more expensive in pound with them than they were. So we looked at the whole situation, didn't we? And we balanced it all off. So looking at, I mean, we're half the price of Nuffield with a lot more to offer. But so that is why we're keeping it down for the residents. The whole reason for us keeping our leisure centres open is for the residents. So they've got somewhere to go, somewhere to enjoy, somewhere to keep fit and everything else. So we've balanced the fees and charges. And to be honest, I think compared to anybody else, we're like half the price. But it is all about the residents. It's about keeping our leisure centres alive.
Sorry, just to come back on that, I totally understand what you're saying, it's all for the residents. What I'm failing to see, and I know it'll be in there, but what I'm failing to see is how we're catering or ensuring we don't exclude the hardest to reach residents, those with the most limited budgets. It's okay saying we're half as expensive as somebody else, that's great, but if that half is still too expensive, then what are we doing for those?
We do have a leisure card, so we do have a discount scheme, and there's quite a number. We're reviewing it at the moment, so there is quite a number of discounts for people who are hard pushed for finances. So there is discounts for people on certain benefits. There's discounts for people who are on a certain pension credits. So there is a scheme available for people who have disabilities as part of the leisure card. We are reviewing that as we speak to see whether that it is good value for money. So we don't sit on our laurels as a leisure company. We do understand that we want to be available and accessible to people who actually really do need it. So we are reviewing that as we speak.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
So Thanks, Chairman. So from a public health perspective, it's really important that we encourage residents to take up the use of leisure activities, etc. But in this regard, what is the leisure company itself doing to encourage people to do so?
So the leisure company works significantly with our active health team. We work with, we look at the activities for children in the summer. So the leisure company runs the activity scheme in the summer. We also look at and run healthy weight schemes. We work with young people in football and girls in football. So our facilities are used on a regular basis to deliver public health projects. Obviously, we've mentioned cancer rehab and prehab. We have physiotherapists from the NHS who also use the leisure centres. So there's significant partnerships that we work with, including some work that we do with some football academies and working with youth leadership. So there is quite a number of partnerships and delivery that we do as a leisure company to support that aspect of public health.
Thank you. Councillor Bollenberg.
On page 131, row 16, local government reorganisation, could you tell us what conversations are taking place and with whom? Is there anything we can do to encourage a future leisure organisation to be delivered in-house?
To be honest, it is a matter of just us shoring up our leisure centres, we're shoring up our activities, and then as LGR comes along, then we'll work with, I mean, Chorley's with us anyway kind of thing, you know what I mean? So West Lancs is slightly different. So I think everything we're doing, we're building towards the future. A lot of things we will make sure move forward. I know I planned, won't we?
So just to be clear, there are no conversations with anyone at the moment on this?
Just not directly conversations in relation to them. Clearly, as part of the local government reorganisation work, we're looking at gathering the information for what everybody does in respect of that. And certainly in relation to the finance workstream, the governance workstream that's currently underway, we're trying to get an understanding of which companies people own, for example, and how they work. No discussions about what you'll then do with that information, but putting that information together so that you can make an informed decision, so you know where everyone stands in relation to how they deliver the services. Clearly, until you know what unitaries will exist, it's harder to have a conversation with somebody you know whether you're going into that unitary with. But at the moment, there is definitely information gathering as to how people operate in all their different areas.
Thank you. We have one last question, and that's on page 133, and I suspect it's a bit of proofreading. The last two items on that table, if I can take SRLE 107, total number of reported accidents, incidents and near-miss events across South Ribble leisure centres, bigger is better.
The number of near misses is better for us. That shows a really good health and safety culture that people are willing to report near misses. The number of accidents isn't and incidents isn't good for us, but we want to see more near miss reporting and less accidents.
And does that apply to RIDOR, whatever RIDOR might be?
Yes, Riddle, yeah.
So are those polarity things correct?
No, we need to have a look at that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're not really into proofreading, but something like that, if it went out, would not look well, would it? Thank you for your time with us. Are there any questions from members? Oh, David, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. Did you want to, instead of raising question 9 as a question, did you want to raise it as a point of note?
Our question 9 was just a note that there are some acronyms in there that are not explained.
Quite a few. There's CRM, Grace, Harriet, Quest and RIDOR.
And again, as a report that's going to the public, it's better if we let people know what those things are. Any members who are not members of the committee wish to ask questions? And there are no members of the public. Thank you for your time. We have some recommendations that before we have our recommendations, can I remind the committee that there is a scrutiny tour of the leisure centres this Thursday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. From here, I presume we're starting. Thank you.
Penwitham.
Sorry?
Penwitham.
Oh, we're meeting at Penwitham. Right, okay, thank you. I hadn't got that in front of me, so yeah, okay, thank you. Recommendations, please.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the themes the committee might like to recommend. The committee thanks the Cabinet Member and Directors for attending and answering questions. The committee commends the reduced subsidy paid by the Council to the Leisure Company. The committee suggests that the business plan be reviewed to include the vision, aims and objectives of the Leisure Company. And finally, the committee asks that the business plan include work to ensure the leisure centres are affordable and accessible to those on low income. Thank you, Chair.
Are we all in favour of those? Yes, thank you. That concludes our business in terms of our interface with yourselves. We've got a few other bits of work that still need doing, but we don't need to delay you in the process of that. Thank you for your time. We have item 11 on our agenda, the review of council engagement with elected members. There should be, I hope, a fairly short piece of work for a task and finish group to undertake. We met earlier and the recommendation is that Councillor Green chairs that and that members are, who did we have as members? Councillor Bollenberg, Councillor Green and myself. And those who are not here can join should they wish to. Thank you. My apologies, I missed item 10, the annual report of the Corporate Performance and Budget Scrutiny Committee. I ask if you'd approve that subject to the addition of a little bit in my introduction, which is text there, but I'm not going to read it out for you. Are you happy with that? And I'm grateful to our officers for formulating that report for us, as they so ably do. Committee matters, meetings and training. There was an online Northwest Strategic Scrutiny Network meeting on the 3rd of June that I and Darren were involved in, which those are quite interesting. There, you don't have to go away for them. So if they're advertised and circulated, please, you might find some benefit from those. Members might like to reflect on the Scrutiny Committee training held on the 4th of June. Again, not everyone was there, but it was useful and helpful, as always. There is an annual conference of the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny in Birmingham, and I haven't got the date in front of me, but we'll circulate the date of that for you if you wish to join. Darren and I went this year. I found it very helpful, as much for networking with people as for content. The content was good and networking was helpful as well, and that's a single day conference, so it's achievable in one day. There is also the possibility of attending LGA-run scrutiny training, which is held at Warwick University. I went 2 years ago when I was first appointed and found it very helpful indeed. And it's open to all members of Scrutiny should you wish to go. I think it'd be quite nice. There's 3 iterations of it. It would be quite nice if anybody did want to go, if we could coordinate our attendance so that we went as a group. That would save on travelling. We'd take one vehicle. Ben will circulate the dates when they are published. Happy with that? I've looked at the Cabinet Forward Plan. There's nothing in particular I feel that we need to pull out of that for our specific attention. Some of those matters will come to us anyway as routine. Are you happy with that? And our own forward plan, which will be updated following this committee training, that was last Thursday, was it? Yeah. Following our training, we're asked to review that. There may be extra things that come into that during the year, but we can make decisions about those as we go. Most of what we've got on our agenda this year is basically our bread and butter matters that are in the title and of what this committee is. Any comments? Then lastly, can I thank our officers for their support and our technician for their support, and I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.